Welcome to the Downtown Development Authority's presentation of the Macomb Street Master Plan for Public Improvements and the Economic Enhancement Strategy, which will guide future economic development activities on Macomb Street. I am Ron Moran, the chairman of the DDA, and I'm going to take a few minutes to explain a little bit about the DDA. The Downtown Development Authority Development District consists of properties that fall in our commercial corridor along Macomb Street from Meridian to East River. The DDA captures the growth in the tax revenue within the district and uses those funds to make public improvements in the district. The DDA is controlled by a board that is appointed by the Township Board. Currently, there are 8 members on the board, and we also have a part-time executive director, Trish Eblin. The Groseal DDA was established in 1992, and its mission is to grow, strengthen, and promote the economic health and vitality of our downtown business district on Macomb Street, while generating a greater connection with our residents and island guests. Our first and main project that was funded by the DDA was the paving of Macomb Street, as well as the installation of sidewalks, street lights, the replacing of an 8-inch water main with a 12-inch water main, and the enclosure of open storm drainage ditches along Macomb Street with a 24-inch storm sewer, and the installation of benches and landscaping. The funding for that project was paid for by the sale of bonds to be repaid by the DDA funds over a 25-year period. I am happy to say that those bonds have been paid in full, and the DDA board now has roughly $100,000 a year to fund some of the improvement projects you are going to hear about tonight. With these additional funding now available, the DDA board wanted to develop a plan to help determine what type of improvements we should focus on over the next 5 to 10 years. The DDA board advertised a request for proposals for consultants to help us with this effort. After an interview process, 2 firms were selected, Spockman, Massa, Michaels, or as they're referred to as SMM, and Wade Trim with a Bonner Advisory Group. With that, I would like to introduce our DDA Executive Director, Trish Eblin, who will introduce our consultants.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our session tonight. My name's, as Ron said, Trish Eblin, and thank you, Ron, for giving that introduction. I am the Downtown Development Authority Director, or DDA, because it's a mouthful to say. I actually started this job in August. My first week was election week, and just have been running ever since, playing catch up and just trying to get new things. I have been an island resident since 2013, and one of the reasons we actually purchased in Groseal was I fell in love with the downtown area. I want to extend an invitation to the public. You're always welcome to come to our DDA board meetings. We typically meet the 4th Thursday of the month. This month it's going to be next Tuesday because we're taking off Thanksgiving. I'd also like to take the opportunity to welcome our new liaison and township supervisor, Jim Budney, to the DDA. And I need to give a big thanks to our former director, Angela Secaucus, and Supervisor Loftus for all the work they did on behalf of the DDA and really getting us to this point. The work on the master plan, as Ron said, began well before I accepted this job by the former director, Angela, and was scheduled to wrap up in March timeframe before the pandemic hit and changed the world as we really know it. We originally hoped to have in-person meetings to present this, but just not possible in the current environment, and we don't want to delay any further. So I'm just as excited to listen tonight as well, because my work will really start with executing this plan. As Ron stated, we have a couple different consultants put together the plan, and we thought it best you hear directly from them. The format will be to have each consultant present, and then we'll allow time for you to ask questions between. We'll then go on to the next consultant. Please type your questions in the chat box, and I'll read them in between just to kind of keep the presentation moving. So the first company I want to introduce is Wade Trim, who's worked with assistance from the Bonner Advisory Group. Tonight we have Adam Young, Luke Bonner, and Tom Gritter with us. Erin Kelly is here from SMM. She'll be running the presentation, and then she'll present her portion after Wade Trim. So without any further delay, let's get started with Adam, Luke, and Tom.
Great. Thank you, Trish. And Erin, thank you for sharing your screen here. So again, my name is Adam Young from Wade Trim. I'm with Luke Bonner and Tom Gritter from Bonner Advisory Group. We're gonna spend about 15 minutes going over the economic enhancement strategy. That's the portion of the one of the two projects that we're talking about this evening, and that's the one that our team has worked on. Go ahead to the next slide. So what did we do as part of this economic enhancement strategy? Well, what's our scope of work? So it's really four primary components. First, we looked at existing conditions. We also studied your demographic profile. You know, what are the trends? Is your community growing in population? Are you an aging community? What are some of the lifestyle characteristics of your community? Then we took a look at the market profile. So in terms of the market, the economy, supply and demand, where are there opportunities within your trade area? We also engaged the community, and we'll talk about that through two primary methods. And then we came up with our strategic recommendations. This is kind of the blueprint for moving forward. This presentation tonight is a summary presentation. It's high level, really, but we're here to present that as an overview and to, of course, allow you to answer or ask questions of us. But we do have our detailed report prepared. The draft is dated October 19th. I was talking to Trish before the meeting, and they're going to be making this report available soon through the township's website or maybe the DDA's website. So we'll give you more details about that later on. Next slide. So I wanted to share a little bit of the findings from the market profile. One of the key things that we looked at is where did we see any retail gaps, essentially places where demand, which is good, you want to have demand where it exceeds supply. And we have found that that does in fact occur really throughout the trade area. For example, within the trade area that we're calling the 5-minute drive time trade area, which is essentially anywhere within a 5-minute drive of Macomb Street. So what are we seeing? We're seeing that there are major retail gaps, again, where there is more demand than there is current supply, meaning that based on the data, the trade area could support more of these retail groups. For example, here's the list of some of the selected groups where there's considerably more demand than current supply. We have found that department stores, for example, restaurants and other eating places, general merchandise, clothing store, building material and supply dealers, auto parts, accessories, and tire stores, and furniture stores. And we certainly found that the population within 5 minutes of your DDA has great spending potential, and through these retail industries, they're looking to spend their dollars in the department store retail industry, in the furniture store, clothing store, and restaurants. And so there is a real opportunity to capture more of these industries within the DDA. Next slide. We also wanted to from the community in terms of what the community sees as our strengths and maybe our opportunities, or what are some of the things that we need to work on, maybe weaknesses that we have. There was a long survey. Hopefully those listening in, you had an opportunity back in I believe it was May, to fill out that survey. It went to many different homeowners for the community. It was well advertised, and we did have a good response from that. Number of questions were asked. For example, what store types do you wish to see added? Overwhelmingly, folks wanted to see more restaurants within the DDA. And then some more listed there: retail stores, food stores, service, entertainment, and bars. One of the questions was specific to the DDA, and this was good for the DDA board to understand from the standpoint of the stakeholders and citizens who filled out the survey, or that we talked to. What opportunities should the DDA pursue? Like, what can the DDA do as an organization to help the business community or help the district? Some of the things that were mentioned were promote communication, awareness, and advertising. trying to seek out and bring in and attract new businesses. Certainly the DDA can offer grants and incentives, packages to business owners to either expand or maybe new business owners to entice them to come in. Trying to eliminate as best we can the red tape, so to speak, to make sure that government is efficient, and where a new business wants to come into town or an existing business wants to expand. Regulation is okay, but certainly we don't want to hinder development by over-regulation. Folks mentioned that the DDA ought to be there to provide public amenities such as streetscapes and flowers and beautification. The next point there, another important thing the DDA ought to do. And then continue to sponsor and support events and festivals that bring traffic into the downtown area. Next slide. After seeing the results of the citizen survey and the stakeholder interviews, conducted confidential interviews with stakeholders that were identified by the DDA as people that would be good to provide insight to our team in helping to develop some strategic recommendations. So after going through the survey and conducting the stakeholder interviews, we came up with this SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. I won't go through those in detail this evening, but certainly it was good to understand weaknesses and threats as things that ought to be addressed. But very importantly, or maybe even more importantly, we were focused on the strengths. How can we capitalize on the many strengths of the Macomb Street Business District? And then, of course, the opportunities, for example, like the market data that I had pointed to earlier, and how could we target those opportunities? And based on really kind of capitalizing on our strengths and targeting the opportunities, we came up with our framework for the strategic recommendations. So I'm going to turn it over to Luke and Tom to kind of go through those. So next slide, please.
Hey, can everybody hear me okay?
We can now, Luke, thanks.
Yep. All right, perfect. I got 3 different things going. They're not working in harmony. Well, thanks, Trish and Ron. Appreciate the opportunity to present this tonight. Thanks, Adam and Tom as well. This has been a great opportunity to work together on this project, and we're very excited about what we've come up with. So Adam went through quite a bit of background work that we put into this. And that background work is essentially what brought us to, 3 strategic recommendations, including some additional recommendations that Tom's actually going to go over in terms of things that you can do to improve business opportunity, business development, real estate development opportunities, and so on. First of all, we thought it was really important, and what we noticed throughout the process is how close-knit the community is and how much support there is to actually see something happen here. So from like an outward messaging standpoint, there's no better message sent to prospective businesses than from an entire community team approach. Groseal is small enough, it's quaint enough, and the relationships are close enough that a small strategic group of stakeholders in the community working together to identify and attract businesses will go a tremendously long way at being successful. Secondly, and Adam sort of touched on this, and these go one and the same. On one hand, it's great to go out as a team and recruit and tell the message of the DDA. But on the second hand, or on the other side of that coin, is to make sure that you're bringing them into a process that's extremely supportive. And that goes to some of the comments that Adam had made on the actual business process of going through the township itself for permitting, licensing, et cetera. And then also part of this, of course, is making sure that you have the right information. It's one thing to actually tell something verbally and have a good meeting with somebody, but what can you leave behind for them that will detail out exactly what you told them, something they can use for future reference, something they can send to a partner or other investors, et cetera. So those are extremely important parts of the process when doing business recruitment. Next slide, please. So another recommendation that we have, and this goes little hand in hand with what we're seeing both visually, which is a corridor that has a lot of real estate opportunities. There's a lot of vacancies, obviously, and I noticed that someone had already sent that message in on the chat. You know, what do we do with the vacant buildings? But there's clearly a couple things based on the data, based on the conversations. One, there's a need and a desire for more restaurants, more cool places to eat, more cool places to drink. So you're starting to see that pent-up demand, I think, will be realized with the Lloyd's changeover into more of an upscale local dining opportunity and drinking opportunity. So that's number one for restaurants. And number two, and we've heard that from people, and number two, we also saw that in the data. There's a lot of money being spent off island on entertainment, dining, and eating. So we sort of looked at this as a twofold opportunity. One is a kitchen incubator, which is allowed to be funded under the DDA program. A kitchen incubator, in essence, is an operation located in a piece of real estate where you'll have multiple restaurant entrepreneurs coming together to use a facility that they normally wouldn't have access to because of cost. They have access to an experienced leadership team, an experienced group of mentors, and they can come in and create different concepts, different restaurant concepts, different brewing concepts, potentially, different cocktail concepts. The point here is that if there's a clear, supportive environment for this restaurant entrepreneurship to come in and the community has an opportunity to experience this, that if there is success amongst these restaurant entrepreneurs, then the logical next step would be to move out of the incubator and into some of the available vacant real estate on Macomb Street. This creates a tremendous amount of excitement if managed properly with the right team in place, mentoring these entrepreneurs. It's a really exciting opportunity for local residents to consistently wait and see what's available the next day, what's for dinner, what's for lunch, what kind of new concept is coming out next month. And that local support of these entrepreneurs goes a long way for them to turn into a real productive and cool opportunity for Macomb Street. So what we've done on the next sort of phase of this is we looked at a couple of real estate projects, one of which, you know, how does a kitchen incubator come together from a real estate perspective? And then also there are interested investors in doing small mixed use projects. And we wanted to take a look at a couple of those and see how financially they could potentially work and what they could actually look like. So I'm going to turn it over to Tom to cover kind of the two real estate aspects of this.
Yeah, everyone, Tom Gritter, if I haven't met you before, again, second what Adam and Luke said, very much enjoyed working on this project and being an avid soccer player. Congratulate you all on your state title over the weekend. That's cool news. So, yeah, if you want to go to the next slide, I can kind of go over a couple redevelopment sites here. You know, they're on Macomb, prominent location. Each one's a little bit different. I know we're a little bit pressed for time, so I won't go through all the financial details, but we have that in the full report. But yeah, the overall intent is hey, these are some sites that could be financially viable. And yeah, are there ways within the community through the DDA or elsewhere to help market them or potentially lease them for a kitchen incubator or some other type of concept? So if you go to the next slide, I'll go through each one of them. We've got 3 sites here. So the first one's vacant land across the street from Kroger. We looked at, is there a way that you could do mixed use building, ground floor retail, some apartments above, activate the street front. A lot of the feedback we got from our community surveys and the individual surveys were, there's so many gaps in the street front, it doesn't bring people outside. This brings people close to the street, livens it up. Got some cost estimates from some local construction companies, and then looked at some rental rates. And yeah, in theory, it could work out. We're a mixed use building in this area, with parking behind it. And again, I won't go through all the financial details, but we do have that in the draft report. Then go to the next slide. We looked at the former Vitale's, and this certainly could be an area where we did the kitchen incubator. The property isn't for sale right now, it's for lease, but the DDA or some other entity could master lease this and then have several different restaurants, take part and sublease from the DDA and come up with these concepts. And as Luke mentioned earlier, with the goal that they could spin off and, take another concept or take a different location in town, and then you have kind of a vibrant restaurant. And as you saw with Adam's trade area analysis, there's a large gap right now for the demand that goes off island. And again, just some site enhancements here as well, bringing a little pocket park up to the street. And then the last one is the Macomb Street Market down on the other end of the street. From talking with a couple private entrepreneurs in the real estate ownership on the island, they've looked at this as kind of a mixed use building where, yeah, you could break it up into maybe a couple different shared uses within it. You could have a coffee shop, you could have some co-working space, you could even have, a little restaurant or cafe. So there's different ways to kind of break this up and just being, creative. It's kind of an open box right now. So if you have one owner, you don't necessarily have to put up demising walls, which gets expensive and then makes it hard to have the right rental rates. So we kind of have a shared use plan here that would be, beneficial. And, if you market and, help support these causes, again, it would be a way to rejuvenate a couple of these areas.
Okay, next slide, and I'll finish it up here. So we had shared some of the big recommendations that business recruitment team and the kitchen incubator and then the priority redevelopment sites. We also, in the report, if you take a look at it, you'll see that we have some additional recommendations. DDA advocacy, for example, to make sure that the DDA is utilizing the resources and in some cases financial opportunities made available by entities, state entities, for example, that are listed here on this slide. The importance is that this is a good way for the DDA to network and to learn best practices from throughout the state, and of course to try and tap into state funding that might be available to support some of these initiatives. Next slide. To the point about eliminating red tape, as part of our economic enhancement strategy, we did look at some of the existing regulations in the township that are applicable to businesses as maybe new businesses come in or they would like to expand. And so we're basing our recommendations in part on best practices that the state has identified for business districts throughout the state, really looking to make sure that communities are development ready or redevelopment ready. And that does include trying to eliminate impediments that are maybe in our ordinances that are not conducive to facilitating development, good development efficiently. And so some of the things that we would recommend, and there's some more detail provided in the report, that your zoning ordinance ought to consider allowing more uses by right, meaning as long as they comply with your rules, that they would be allowed. To expand the listing of uses, some compatible new economy uses that are very successful in this new economy, like medical research or studios, films, arts and craft studios, maker spaces, places for artisans to do what they do best in a space, and other incubator spaces like that. Certainly parking is an issue, and flexibility is the key. Businesses have suggested that. And so we would suggest that the township look at making their parking standards in the Macomb Street District very flexible. And then we've identified a few opportunities maybe where you can tweak some of your development review processes to make them more streamlined. And then finally, the next slide, some other considerations. A lot of this ties into what Erin on the SMM team is going to be talking about as part of her design plan. But certainly the DDAs traditionally throughout Michigan support public facility improvements and infrastructure investments to support business growth and development. We certainly believe that the DDA should continue to do that. Also provide support for community events and public art. I will turn it over. I'll close our presentation here. I'll turn it back over to Trish. And if maybe there's questions that you would like us that have been asked that we could answer at this time.
Sure. Let me just kind of go through what's been asked so far. I think you kind of touched on Jenna's question. What, if anything, does the DDA do to help entice property owners to improve upon used buildings or sell, lease vacant ones? So we kind of talked about a little bit of that. And so we'll move on to the next question. Are incubator participants required to stay in the GI district after participation in order to use the GI incubator?
So we don't have the specific framework for the incubator plan in place, and that would be something that needs to be developed ultimately. The DDA Act actually has some limitations on what, if a DDA does an incubator, preferences that they need to give for the prospective tenants of that incubator space. So there are some statutory requirements for them, but certainly you can frame your program for example, entice people to stick around, or you can develop your parameters, or you can give more a higher preference if there's, say, a number of folks who want to participate in that to those that will have a longer term benefit to the community. So you can frame, or you can develop your program to accomplish some of those objectives.
Okay. And then what will be done to support existing businesses on Macomb? There's so much to be done in the way of fostering communication with the community, creating walkable areas to encourage time spent downtown, more parking, etc.
Yeah, I think maybe Luke touched on it a little bit, where you talked about having, that the team of folks working together, and then making, of course, making sure that that team is trying to promote the district, making more people aware about, the benefits and success stories and things. Luke, do you want to just cover that a little bit?
Yeah, certainly there is awareness, creating awareness for what's going on in the district. I think part of our discovery was there wasn't much of an effort to communicate what's going on there, technically maybe even on the island itself, but certainly off the island. I think one of the things that came up a number of times is that ultimately communication is key. So having someone who's consistently communicating with businesses and with stakeholders, it sounds simple, but it is actually pretty amazing what happens when there is a significant amount of discussion that happens amongst local businesses. That is the most appropriate way to communicate potential resources that are available with the state of Michigan, for example, or with the county, or with the DCC, the small business development centers. But that information is only as good as how it's communicated. So engaging with businesses and stakeholders is really paramount, especially as small of a community and small of a district that you have is. And so building that team is just part of that.
Thank you. And Jenna kind of expanded on her first question. She said there appear to be many vacant homes and rundown homes amidst the business district. Could the township offer to either buy these out or at least offer grants to improve their curb appeal? So we do have a grant program for businesses, but we don't necessarily for the vacant homes.
Right. Yeah, the Macomb Street District is unique in that you do have a number of dwellings that are located right on Macomb Street. Certainly the DDA is looking to beautify the district through streetscaping and things of that nature, but they're not necessarily providing grants for homeowners. Trish, you mentioned they do so for business owners. That's the DDA. You know, certainly the township has codes and ordinances that they would enforce. If there's blighted properties or dilapidated buildings or structures that are not able to be or not safe for habitation, that there are methods that the township can work with the DDA together to try and mitigate those issues. It's not an easy solution.
Okay.
Yeah, and if I could add a little bit too, I mean, I think one of the benefits of putting together the financial modeling and financial performance for some of these other real estate projects, I think it's important. An incentive is one thing, but an incentive is not what makes a deal happen. What makes a project happen is your ability to show somebody that they can actually make money from their investment. So, building some of these models for you, will help to sit down and look at some of these buildings and say, hey, this is how this project could potentially work. And if somebody is interested, then if there are qualifiers on that property, whether it's blighted, functionally obsolete, needs an exterior restoration, et cetera, then that's where those incentives can maybe help increase the likelihood of a project like that happening. But someone has to know that they can make money first.
Yes. What to continue on with the questions, and we can follow up with some of these as well if needed. What was the total number of survey respondents and what age groups were represented? We need to be able to quantify these results.
Yes, and I think maybe Aaron might be in a position to answer. I know that it was an electronic survey. I believe, Aaron, you can quantify those results. I know that 252, I believe, was the total number of responses.
That's right. We had,
and if it's part of your presentation, Aaron, we can wait. I'll hold that question if that's better.
I think we can address it now. I mean,
okay.
We had a really great response. So Adam's correct, 252 respondents, and more than 60 of those respondents have direct ties to Macomb Street in the sense of either living on Macomb, owning a business on Macomb, or working on Macomb Street, which was really great representation. The demographics overall were a decent reflection of the community. We did our best to reach youth, and I would say the survey was not excellent at that, but we had good representation across age groups.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this isn't me, but I'm just reading the question. I'm trying to open a great restaurant in downtown Grosse Ile. I've been handed many roadblocks, specifically by Tim Thompson, the current building inspector. I've gone through this process in Trenton and Wyandotte. Grosse Ile has been the hardest and most unsupportive community so far. What can we do to encourage people to spend their money to invest into Grosse Ile rather than inhibiting it? When I say community, I'm saying specifically about township residents, township employees, not residents. Township employees, not residents.
I think if you look in our report and our recommendations, particularly our first one about formulating a business recruitment team, that is a key aspect of their charge. It would be to look at some of these things, whether they're perceived or real inhibitors to development, to identify those, to work with township leaders DDA leaders to see what can be done to minimize those. I had mentioned, some of the regulatory barriers that are specifically cited in the plan that maybe could be addressed, that the DDA ought to bring up with township leadership to address those as well. But I think, ultimately, through this team, their charge again would be to promote the district, to share success stories, to try and identify and eliminate any barriers that would inhibit new businesses to come into the community, but to put a good face forward to potential investors like yourself, and to kind of be that champion, like, hey, we are stakeholders in this district. We have, been successful, or we have evidence about, the financial performance that we put together, for example, that demonstrate that this project is financially viable, right? We have, we can share market data that shows that there is demand for restaurants in this community. So with this information, with kind of that new kind of paradigm and a team of folks who are ready to kind of promote and share the success stories about this district, hopefully we can kind of overcome some of the things that you had cited in that question.
Okay. Where would the funding come from for the incubator, and who are the experienced mentors you mentioned?
So we can, we'll take that in two parts. From a funding perspective, the DDA has a budget. The DDA also has the ability to levy additional mills for operations. We added in the concept of principal shopping district, or to make it simple, special assessment district, in really kind of demonstrating multiple ways that the DDA can accomplish their goals. And one of those is infrastructure enhancements, placemaking enhancements, which could be funded through special assessment or DDA budget. And then you also have the kitchen incubator, if prioritized, can be funded out of DDA budget or from that additional mill increase through the DDA statute. In terms of experienced mentors, I'll let Tom talk about that, because there are actually some very, very impressive people that are residents on the island that have a significant amount of experience in this.
Yeah, there's several well-known restaurant owners who have restaurants, primarily off island, that have expressed interest in doing restaurant on the island, and for one reason or the other, they have not done that yet, whether not the right location or bureaucratic process, or busy with other things. But again, from the interviews I had with the variety of these owners, they're all very interested in doing it. And again, this is a way to, if they would do an incubator, it's a way that you could kind of collaborate together, and there's less risk than starting a full-blown incubator or full-blown restaurant that you can kind of, you said, incubate out of this. So.
Okay, thank you. Is the Macomb Street District's market service area just GI residents, or is there a market for off-islanders to dine and shop here?
Great question. We actually looked at 3 different geographic areas, again, based on drive time. So the 5-minute radius, which is most of the, is pretty much just limited to the island itself. The 10-minute drive time radius, which covers the entire island and then beyond into the mainland, including, a good chunk of Trenton and even down to Gibraltar. And then the 15-minute radius, which goes further beyond and includes portions of Wyandotte and Brownstown and Woodhaven and Riverview and further. Yes, so the market data supports at all 3 geographic levels that there is a demand, and that the Macomb Street Business District can capture the demand that's from folks who do not live on the island itself, but who could be drawn in from 10 minutes beyond, 15 minutes beyond, and to dine and shop in Macomb Street. Yes.
Thank you. And we'll take one more question, then we'll go ahead and go to Aaron, and then we can take any other questions at the end. So we get, where does GI currently stand with redevelopment ready status? Would you say we're halfway there, less or more?
So I actually do not have the answer to that question. I think that would be, typically it's not a DDA that seeks to participate in that redevelopment ready program, but it's a township function. And so our recommendation to the DDA is that it's a good program and that you ought to, DDA, at least encourage the township to explore participation in that program. I'm not sure where the township is at though.
Thank you. Okay, so why don't we'll, that was the last question for now. So we'll go ahead and we'll turn things over to Erin to present her, what the work her company did, and then we can come back and answer any more questions. So Erin, if you're ready, we're ready for you.
Great. Well, good evening, everyone. Just get this set up. And here we are. My name is Erin Kelly. I'm here with Spackman Mossop Michaels. And what we have this evening is, just as with Adam and his team, an abbreviated version of the final draft report that we submitted to the DDA in October. And so I understand that in the future, these draft reports will be posted on the DDA's website. So that's something we can all look forward to. Our scope for this exercise was to really look at the public improvements for a design enhancement plan and for a public arts plan. And so tonight what I'm going to walk through is really the process that we used and some of the findings, the recommendations that have emerged from this work, and then some suggested next steps. So I highlighted our scope for this work. And, we kicked off this planning process in the, the coldest part of last winter with a series of conversations that started out on Macomb Street. And we heard very many things. We heard, amongst the many things, a real love of some of the attributes of Macomb Street, particularly the timeless qualities and the Macomb Street as the historic heart of Roseville.
Can we let her know that the sound just got really weird?
Sure. Erin?
Yes.
Your sound's a little bit off. It's like echoey or little.
I'm going to do something.
That sounds a little better right now.
Okay. If it happens again, I will do something to try and adjust. So just
okay.
That. Yep.
I will. Thank you, Marie.
Yeah, thank you. Emerging from our first conversations was really the framing for some goals for this framework. And the three that emerged were the need to identify kind of character identity zones along Macomb Street. It's quite long, and thinking about it as a series of pieces emerged from our first conversations. Another was this real interest in connecting to the history and the culture of Macomb Street and of Groseville overall through this work. And then third was the goal of integrating Macomb Street into new and existing programs. And so in terms of the different zones, from our conversations, and then also from some technical work, some analysis, some walking back and forth along Macomb, 4 different zones emerged. The first really is traveling from west to east at Meridian Road to roughly where the Tasty Freeze is. So we think of this end of Macomb Street as having the larger scale commercial properties currently along Macomb. Currently the most visited businesses are located at this end. And this end, there's obviously some momentum with Lloyd's and Meridian Road serving as a gateway And we think there are, unique opportunities in each of these zones, with Zone 1 just being the first. The second zone is the kind of lengthiest zone along Macomb Street. It is largely residential with a bit of commercial properties mixed in. And Zone 2 really runs from, roughly the Tasty Freeze down to Lyons Road. And so, as I said, this is the longest zone, so it's also the furthest distance to travel. We think this is an opportunity to add potentially more seating elements and moments of rest. The residential uses introduce a real opportunity for smaller scale unifying elements in this zone. And we also noted an opportunity to add some enhanced identity to the intersection at Park Lane. The third zone is a wonderful asset along Macomb Street. This is some of the smallest scale commercial fabric along Macomb, really running from Lyons Road to Bishop's Cottage. The built fabric feels very dense and very walkable. Currently, there are many key properties in this zone that are for sale or available for lease. And there's also the great adjacency to the schools. The fourth zone is really the other end, the other gateway to Macomb. The fourth zone, which is largely the multifamily residential properties and the connection to the waterfront. This end is very green, it's very luscious. There's a robust tree cover. We also learned from our first conversations that there's very poor cell phone reception at this end of Macomb, and a kind of limited visual and pedestrian connection to the river as well as to East River Road. And so here's a map of those 4 character zones to get a sense of, where they land on a map. And, as I said, with the character zones, we think that there is an opportunity to select unifying elements that can behave across all 4 zones to create a more cohesive pedestrian experience along Macomb. But we also sense that each zone can have its own investment strategy. And kind of early in the planning process, we were very excited about opportunities to invest in Zone 3 specifically, given the density of vacant buildings, properties that are for sale or for lease at present. And as I referenced, we also were very interested in opportunities to connect the history and culture of Macomb Street to a vision for its future. And 2 elements that really stood out to us were the culture of boating and access to the water, which is truly one of Grosse Ile's greatest assets as an island community, as well as some of the great historic properties that are just south of Macomb Street. So in our early conversations, we heard quite a bit about these properties and about the Historic Museum, but had difficulty kind of understanding where they were in relationship to Macomb. So we put together this map to just illustrate, the DDA is bounded by the boundary you see here. So the plan and the improvements from DDA funds would need to happen inside of the DDA's boundary. But we do see a great synergy and opportunity, potentially to connect, a walk or a promenade down Macomb and be able to also, view and understand some of the historic gems on Grosse Ile. And so, following the first conversations and some of our analysis and input, COVID arrived, and then we launched the survey in conjunction with Adam and his team, which we referenced earlier. As I mentioned, there was a great deal of input, and we were pleased with the demographics of the survey respondents in terms of their being reflective of the island overall. We took the input from the survey and did some work and emerged with some recommendations that I'm going to walk through now. So for the long term, the long view, there was great support for exploring the potential of a waterfront park that could really extend from the river through to Macomb Street and activate the East Gateway to the Macomb Retail District. The middle term improvement that we heard the most support of and we think will be catalytic for Macomb Street is to redevelop Lions Park into an intergenerational community space. We think this is an opportunity to revisit potentially some of the play facilities that are around Macomb Street, as well as think about potentially a space with a signature water feature, with seating amenities, with Wi-Fi, but truly an intergenerational space that can draw people down to Macomb for a cup of coffee, to take a phone call in the park. And in the short term, we heard almost uniform support. This was the most unanimously supported item on the survey for street tree enhancement. So planting street trees and installing benches as unifying elements to provide pedestrian rest stops along Macomb Street. So this is an example of a unifying element that can be added to each of the zones and used to enhance the distinct character of each of the zones along Macomb. The other short-term activation that we heard great support for was to commission sidewalk murals at designated intersections along Macomb Street. These are fun and bright and an opportunity to build off of an emerging public arts program while also ensuring safety along Macomb. And then finally, in terms of the short term, we did quite a bit of work that's in the full report looking at potential programming opportunities for events, noting that really the winter is the season that has the least amount of programming, but where we think there's a really great opportunity to build. And some of the front runners in terms of future programming opportunities were a craft beer festival, as well as a kind of consistent farmers market that could occur along Macomb. We, in our survey, asked quite a few questions around a public arts program and what some components of that might be. And we heard support overall from a series of conversations to really look at a rotating public art program for Macomb Street that would include multiple pieces of art created by artists with ties to the region in the sense of not only Southeast Michigan, but really the Great Lakes. And we think that a public arts program is a strategy that will enhance the experience of Macomb Street for residents, as well as for visitors to the island. And so here's some examples of some of the public art programs we looked at. I'm very mindful of the time. And this is a map where you can see the distribution of the rotating art installation, which are the pink shapes, the historic markers that would work together with the arts program. And then also in blue, the blue shape, we heard some support for incorporating a student art opportunity into this program, as well as ties to the arts crosswalks, one in each zone, colored orange. So in terms of next steps, we thought the first step could be to commission a sidewalk mural. It is a very relatively low capital cost improvement that provides opportunities for community participation and to work with an artist from Roseal. The second step, to develop a plan to install trees and benches along Macomb Street. Third, to support the development of a public arts program, to form a DDA Arts Committee that would advise the DDA on next steps. Fourth, to finalize the scope and begin design work for Lions Park. And fifth, to conduct a feasibility study for the waterfront park. And in addition to the report that we provided to the DDA in October, we also kind of provided a memo with some options and recommendations around fundraising. So regional funders and programs that might align with each of these next steps and priorities. Groseal is well positioned in terms of the network of Michigan-based funders, particularly given your relationship to the water and the Great Lakes being a funding priority for many of the arts programs. And so we're very excited about being able to move this work forward and have conversations with supporters in the region. With that, I see some questions coming in. I think we can open it up.
Yes. Okay. So this is more relating to the prior presentation, but it's from Lloyd's. I think it's important to kind of say, so everybody sees it. I've spent $225,000 to date just in remodeling, new cement, new paint. I could hire 30 plus employees locally right now. I'm installing bike racks, outdoor patio, landscaping, etc. Turning an old school bar into a family restaurant, a place families can bike to and drive to. I'm starting to think Groseal supervisors and inspectors want to talk more about doing things rather than stepping up and make things happen. So I don't think anybody needs to address that, but it's an opportunity for me to learn from this Lloyd's experience and sit down with our new incoming supervisor, our some of our management team, and hear and understand the process they went through, and maybe use it as a springboard to how we can make our town a little bit more business ready, friendly. So I don't know if anybody has any more comments, but that's kind of what I took away from that this is a great opportunity. I'm sorry they had to go through this, but what can we look at and fix moving forward? So let's see, what could be done to facilitate parking for events here? A farmer's market is a lovely idea as an example, but where do we put the traffic that attracts? And one thing, I'll comment one thing. We have a lot more parking than I realize. We have parking lots. DDA has a couple parking lots, and then of course the high school. And I'll let you respond to it, Erin. But I keep finding parking lots I didn't know existed.
Yes, that's a great question. And in our full report, we actually go into much more detail around the potential of events on Macomb Street specifically. We think they're a really great way to cultivate the tradition of visiting Macomb, at least on a monthly basis for events and programming. We looked at strategies to actually activate the eastern end of Macomb Street and utilize some of the parking available at the high school. We think because of Lions Road, there's the opportunity to close a segment of Macomb and route traffic without, still impeding access to the eastern side, to East River Road. But we've thought about parking, and that's one of the many reasons we're excited about the segment that we call Zone 3. So in the full report, there's some drawings of actually parking staging for events because we got just really excited about the potential.
Okay, thank you. Was there any express need for more mainstream lodging to capture visitors to enjoy Groseal and our retail, et cetera? Did that come up in the survey maybe or anything?
That did not come up in the general survey, but I wonder, Adam, if that came up in any of the conversations that you and your team had, the focus group conversations?
Yeah, this is Tom. I did most of those conversations. It not really, I guess, mainstream lodging came up. People kind of lamented the loss of the bed and breakfast, and having more options to stay. But in terms of kind of a, traditional hotel, that didn't come up. But, kind of the bed and breakfast or Airbnb options, especially, the ability maybe to create that as part of a development, did come up.
Okay, thank you. And you touched a little bit on this, Aaron, but if somebody asked specifically, has a shuttle for special events been investigated?
We did not specifically look at a shuttle, but that would also lend itself to utilizing, the larger parking lot that is in front of the Kroger as an amenity for, staging events that aren't necessarily at that end of Macomb Street. And Trish is right, there really is, quite a bit of parking, but I'll be the first to admit when it is, quite cold in January, I do prefer to be closer to my car.
Right.
So, yeah.
And kind of following up on the parking, is there any consideration for more permanent parking solutions? The event parking sounds thought through, but what about when we have a booming restaurant that attracts traffic? Most businesses have no more than 5 spaces, it seems. Would walkable lots be feasible?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something that we definitely discussed internally. Was also just the culture of use, especially towards the eastern end of Macomb Street, where the businesses are closer together, and so would you park in one place to go to the bakery and then drive across the street, to visit your travel agent? Is that what is acceptable in terms of parking in one space and then spending half an hour, 45 minutes walking around? Consistent signage around that could be helpful. Mm-hmm.
Was there any demand and opportunities for empty nester and starter housing? How do we get young adults and older adults to stay here and age in place? What about first floor housing?
I can maybe speak to that. This is Adam again. Certainly, we know that throughout the country there is a kind of trends, the housing trends that empty nesters, for example, are looking to downsize, and maybe young people are not able to afford the large 2,500 square foot ranch on a larger lot. And I really believe that that this district actually has a pretty good variety of housing, ranging from small single family dwellings, on small lots directly fronting the street, to some multiple family options and condominium options as well. I know that your zoning ordinance would allow for different types of housing as well, single family housing, townhouse housing, apartments. So I wouldn't say that that there aren't opportunities or that your codes prevent the development of housing. So I think in the housing market generally, as you say, Brian, in your comment, that there is a demand for that. And I think, and I'm sure Aaron would agree, that business districts are successful when they have people who live there, who can shop, and walk down the street and, pick up their groceries. And so this is a great opportunity in the Macomb Street District to have a place where people can, live as well as shop and dine and socialize.
Okay, thank you. The last comment I'm seeing right here, can parking requirements be waived and mandate or encourage shared parking solutions? So lots to do on parking here.
Well, we had talked about how, from the perspective of the business community, that we would like to see flexibility given in the code, especially for a site that has an existing established business and would want to expand, but maybe the site has limitations, its size, for example. And so maybe, you know, there are communities that would certainly allow the shared parking. I know that your ordinance does allow shared parking agreements. I think that's definitely a good thing. You know, I think your ordinance even allows opportunity for maybe deferred parking. And many business districts, because of their mixed use nature, allow maybe payment in lieu of parking, some kind of a program like that, or just even a straight reduction in the total number of parking spaces that would be required within the business district, given that it's a mixed use district. And there is some public parking available in the couple of off-street lots that the DDA operates.
Thank you. Okay, that looks like, and Marie actually commented that she and Lloyd's definitely share their lot, which we do know that. So I don't see any more, whoops, one more question. Following up on Brian's remark, were challenges to our school populations considered and how amenities and design might respond proactively? How did our school district's administration and board participate in the inputs to this plan? Was consideration given to building up rather than building out?
So I can answer part of this, and perhaps Adam, you can follow on. You know, in terms of the public realm plan, we're very interested in improving the pedestrian connection between the schools and Macomb Street. That's part of, you know, the interest in having a crosswalk here. It's part of what we think the Lions Park will be so catalytic for Macomb Street is that the park can be part of strengthening the procession from the school to Macomb Street. We worked, you know, back in February, we were working to coordinate some input from the high school students specifically into this planning process and into what ended up being the survey. And when there was a change in terms of the DDA coordinator position, some of those conversations, you know, had to slow down. And then with COVID, you know, as I referenced in the beginning, we actually did get, I think, a handful of high schoolers' input on the survey, but we had originally envisioned doing some hands-on workshops with the high school students, which is not the administration, but coordinated through the administration to happen appropriately. So from the public realm perspective, we see a lot of opportunities to strengthen the connection to the high school.
And one comment, after Craig had attended our DDA meeting, I actually reached out to the business manager at the school, kind of specifically asking her questions around, you know, was there a need for school of choice housing, what different things. And what she didn't really have a comment on that, but she did just express to her how she'd like, you know, the school and the business district to work closer together, which I'm all for, you know, as much as we can work together is great. So, you know, I am kind of trying to build relationships with key people at the schools as well. And let's see, similar to Craig's question about design, was a form-based code examined, which would require 2 4-story buildings so we could get denser and more walkable?
Maybe Aaron, you also want to weigh in on this one. I'm not sure, but you know, when we looked at your zoning regulations, and I know that you don't have a form-based code. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's more of a prescriptive approach to zoning, where you would actually say, as you suggest in your comment, that any new development shall be 2 stories tall, or even 3, or something like that. You know, I don't know if that's the right approach. I think the approach that you currently take is one where you focus more on here's what we would recommend in terms of, you know, design and guidelines and that kind of a thing. I certainly agree that you ought to, you know, allow for densification within the district. And I think that's certainly important, given, especially outside of, you know, Aaron was mentioning zone 3, which is a little bit more dense, but elsewhere it's more spread out. So I agree that densification is good. I don't know if everyone would necessarily agree that the form-based code approach, which is more of, you shall do it this way, is necessarily the best approach.
Mhm.
Other than a restaurant, what other types of commercial retail would be beneficial to add to our current business district?
I think one of the things that we certainly saw in our market study, and maybe Luke or Tom can jump in as well, but the small kind of specialty retailers, particularly related to home goods, certainly came up quite a bit in our study. So there's one example of retail. So home focused kind of specialty retail.
That may be the last question, but these have been great questions and comments and considerations. If you have any that you haven't thought of, we're also recording this, so I hope to get it out to people who weren't able to attend. So if you think of anything else, feel free to email me, trishe@grozio.com, or call me at the township. Like over the next week, I'd like to gather any other questions that weren't asked or comments, and I will get the answers to you. I want to thank everybody from the community for taking time out of their busy lives tonight to participate. Thank Wade Trim, Bonner Advisory, and SMM for taking time tonight to present and answer questions, and also being so flexible and responsive with their time during this pandemic. It's not been easy. So what's next is, as they stated, I have copies of the final plan that has a lot more detail. I will work with Brian Friel to get those posted on our website. So you can, whoever wants to, can have access to view those. I will start next, the DDA, we will start putting together plans to start executing some of these plans. Our goal is by next summer for you to start to see some of these ideas being implemented on Macomb Street. And then kind of lastly, I have to give my plug. I really want to encourage everyone to consider shopping local this holiday season. We have so many hidden gems already in our downtown district, and the businesses just need you now more than ever. I had to make the decision to postpone Ladies' Night, which is to the spring because of the pandemic, and that definitely hurt the businesses. I mean, in past years, we've had over 200 women descend on Macomb Street ready to eat, drink, and shop, and we're just not going to have that weekend this year. We're still planning to have Island Glow where we light the tree at Perdino's, but it's going to have to be different. One change, we're going to look at moving it to Lions Park where we can all be more socially distanced versus being just in the commons. So if you feel safe, we'd like to invite you to join us on December 4th, starting at 6. And I think just have a great rest of the evening and a good holiday season, and just keep masking up and socially distancing. And thank you to everybody.
Thank you, Trish.
Good night,
Thank
Trish.
you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank